Our next speaker we're going to bring from you, it comes from a different area, comes from an area of taxes once again. And he's become a good friend of mine because I've known him for several years, and he challenged the IRS on their requirement that they want to make you think that you have to file a 1040 income tax confession form. Well, he relied upon government's own documentation. He relied upon the law. He relied upon IRS's own instruction booklets. But the government came after him and charged him for the so-called crime of not filing 1040 income tax confession forms, misnamed returns. And when the government found out that this man had relied upon their own publications and the law for not filing a 1040 income tax confession form, they dismissed all their charges. No need to even go to trial to begin with. Folks, if you don't go to trial, you can't lose in a tax trial. You know, heard about that? And he did it. He's a hero in my book. So please help me give a warm hand of welcome to Robert Lawrence.
I hope you'll all give me just a couple of minutes while I set this up. I am technologically challenged, to say the least. So it's going to take me just a couple of seconds because last time I spoke for Paymon, some of the feedback we got from some of the members of the audience was that I was a little hard to follow. So I'm hoping maybe with a PowerPoint presentation it'll make it just a little easier to kind of follow the logic train a little bit, because we're going to be using a lot of citations of law, a lot of court cases, and so I'm kind of hoping that, you know, by being able to see it up here, it'll be a little more cohesive for you. So I don't know where the computer plug-in is up here. Right here? Is this it? I don't know. The one that I use on my monitor doesn't look like this. So I told you I was challenged. Now, come on. I wasn't kidding. No, I may be a lot of things, but computer literate is not one of them. So I thank those who are for kind of bearing us up here.
Okay, it's probably not going to go immediately to the screen either.
Okay. It's an antique, too, so it's going to take it a couple of seconds to warm up here. It sucks to be poor. Now, see, if I was wealthy like some of the folks around here, I could get one of those new high-speed things that just kind of, as soon as you look at it, it turns itself on. You know, it kind of reminds you, kind of reads your mind. So I'm an antique using antique equipment, and so we're just going to have to try to get along with it as best we can.
I'm going to have to go get someone to get the key command to get that jet through that port.
Okay. So anyway, while this is kind of booting up, I'll give you a little bit of the boring history of myself. Jeff Dickstein said, or Steen, Jeff, forgive me if I mispronounce your name, because the S-T-E-I-N I've heard pronounced different ways by different people, even here, so I'm not sure which way it is, and I've not had a chance really to talk with Jeff much. So I hope he'll overlook that. But anyway, he said something that was very profound a moment ago, and I find it to be true, that we create our reality. After all, the scriptures themselves says, as a man purposes in his heart, so he is. All right, so if you think you're a loser, you think you ain't got a chance, you think you're going to fall down and die, then that's probably what's going to happen. So turn that around and say that, no, I am a child of the King, you know, that I have more than just myself, you know, doing this battle. And we are, the culmination of our lives is what brought us to a particular point in time. And if you were anyone else other than who you are, you would not be the person you were meant to be, and you would not be in that place and time. So with that said, you know, I had a lot of things in my history that brought me to this particular place. Things that made me question convention. When I was a kid, I was probably 9 or 10 years old. This is probably 1967. We were traveling. My grandfather had a what he called a structural material salvage business, which means he ran a junkyard. And he worked in structural metals, pipes, I-beams, things like that, including some car parts and so on that they would take to the salvage yard and collect for cash. One morning, we're making a run to Jackson, Tennessee, and he gave me $1, because back then you could buy a sandwich for, you know, about 15, 20 cents, and you could buy a pop for $0.25, and then you could buy some, you know, like an ice cream bar or something like that for another 10. So you knew $1 would cover it all, you know, so I was good to go. And he asked me, he says, "You got any money with you?" And I said, we called him Daddy. I said, "Daddy, you know I do. You gave it to me before we left the house. Why are you asking?" He goes, "Well, let me see it." So as a, what's the word I'm looking for here? As a child who did not like being taunted by his grandfather, I kind of gave him some attitude. I said, "Well, here." And he goes, "That's not money." And I'm what? He goes, "That's not money." And I went, "Okay, smarty pants, what is it?" He goes, "Ask your dad when you get home." We get home, and my dad says, "Well, remind me when we get back to Illinois." Now, we're on vacation down here, right? And I'm like, that's not going to be for another week. That's forever, you know? So we wait for the whole week, and we get back up there. And I reminded him, and he said, "Oh, well, thanks for reminding me." And he took me down to a little bank called Celestial Savings and Loan. And he walks me up to the counter, and he pulls a $20 bill out of his pocket, and he lays it on the counter, and he says, "I'd like to exchange this for money." And the lady looks at him, smiles, slips a $20 gold piece across the counter to him. I was like, wow, you know, because at that time they were still exchangeable. Imagine that. And he hands me this gold coin, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, wow, that's cool. 67. Yeah. And I'm holding this, and I'm like, man, that's heavy, you know, for a kid. I mean, I wasn't going probably 40 pounds myself, and so that was a pretty good weight. And I thought, I handed it back to him. He hands it across the counter and exchanges it back for another, gets his 20 back. And he says, "This is a receipt for money." He says, "The money was what you just held." Whoa. My grandfather also corrupted me with something else on that same trip. He goes, he was always this diehard rebel, you know, Southern Confederacy going to rise again, you know, and a kind of guy. And so I'm like, all right. He says, "Whose flag is that over there?" And I'm looking for a Confederate flag. I knew he had something up his sleeve. And I'm looking over there. I'm like, "What flag?" He goes, "That one over on the flagpole." I'm looking. Where's the other flagpole? I see the stars and stripes over there. I just know he's got something else. Oh. Okay. All right. So anyway, the long story short, I finally pinned him down to the stars and stripes, and I go, "Is that the one you're talking about?" He goes, "Yeah." He says, "Whose flag is that?" And I said, "What's the flag?" And I said, "It's America." He says, "No, it's not." And I went, "What?" Okay, now you got me on the money. Now you're getting me on the flag thing. Okay, whose flag is this? And he says, "When you're old enough to understand, you'll know." And I went, "Thanks." You know? So, but he made me look. And you know, it was not until, I'm 50 now, it probably wasn't until I was about 47 that I knew. All that time I thought that was my flag. That's not the flag. of the United States of America, and you have historical proof of that. And if you ever get the opportunity to get on any website, type in a word search for civil flag of peace. Because the flag that we consider to be the flag of the United States of America, and I'm sure the DOJ is probably looking at this presentation and go, he needs psychological evaluation. Because he's crazy. Well, that's what I thought when my grandfather told me that, too. I thought he was nuts. But lo and behold, when you look into the National Archives and you look at paintings of warships that were back in the day when they had the tall ships and the sails and all that, they have paintings of men of war that had the stars and stripes on one side, which had a blue field, white stars, and red and white stripes. And right next to it was a merchant ship, a ship of peace that flew the flag of peace, which has a white field, blue stars, and vertical red and white stripes. That flag has been hid from us. I told myself, Payman, I was not going to do this. We carry with us certain baggage, I guess, on many fronts. When I hear guys like Anthony, William, I see what happens to Sherry, I get emotional. And as much as I try not to, I can't help it. Let me see if I can get this here up here. Uh-oh, what happened here? So I have to kind of distract myself with things like this so I can regain my composure. Because this is my country, our people. And when I see the injustices that I see, it kills me. Come on now. Okay. Somebody know how to do this? F8? F8. Nope. I told you I'm technologically challenged. Thank you. Okay, let's see if it's going to advance. Uh-oh. Not him, Joe. Ah, there we go. Okay. Whew. Scared me for a minute. Last night, just to let you know, I was putting the finishing touches on this presentation, and I hit the wrong button. And poof. It was gone. And I'm like, oh, Father, help me. I'm in trouble. And so this morning I got up real early, and I started putting it back together again. There's some things that I'm missing, some points I wanted to cover that I couldn't find, and so you're all getting what's left, what I was able to scratch together this morning. So this, again, is something completely new for me, and I'm hoping that I can bear through this. But I love my country. I love our people. And when I see the injustices done to many, many, many people across the country, Dick Simconen, and I can't even begin to go down the list of people who have been railroaded by a government who absolutely knows what I'm going to tell you today. They want to deny it. They want to hide it. They want to do everything they can to sweep it under the rug and pray no one finds out about it. But they tell you that, in my case in particular, that they dismissed on an accounting error. Okay, so those of you who have talked with me, and I know that you pulled up the court record and you've read the transcripts, and they said, well, we've dismissed because of an accounting mistake. Well, that tells me two things, both of which I'm investigating, by the way, and that we have not yet come to a solid conclusion on which is the best tack to take to move forward in the courts. But anyway, one of the things it tells me was that, A, they were completely unprepared for what they found. B, they made a tacit admission when they admitted that they dismissed based on accounting errors that there was no assessment made and no tax could possibly have been evaded, because they did not have solid numbers on which to base their allegation. And when they did start running the numbers, they found out they were trying to collect more than what was allowed by law, which is a violation of 7433, which is a criminal act. So yeah, those people who perpetrated that crime against me have got much to fear, because we're not gone. We're just waiting until we get all of the tax lined up in a big long strip, and I'm going to make them walk it barefoot. Okay? So anyway, thanks for coming, guys. You know, all of you. You took time out of your lives to come down here to learn things. Some of them even said they came here specifically to see me, and to me that's a major honor. I hope that what you're going to learn today is worthy of the trip and the expense that you've gotten. But there's a lot of people I need to thank first, okay? And one of the things you're going to learn about me, if you've ever talked to me in person, is that there are certain words I don't use, and this may be offensive to some of you, and it's not meant to, I don't judge another person for what they do, because everybody who's here must rise and fall, live and die, based upon what they know. So I do the same, okay? Now, one of the things that I believe is that my Creator, I cannot take His name or make His name come to naught. And so some of you may be offended by the use of the name. I particularly am not. So there's the people I want to thank. First off is my Creator. And when He wrote His name in Babylon, when He told Nebuchadnezzar that you're done, buddy, and He signed it when that hand came out of space and wrote the name on the wall, He said His name was Yahuwah. The one who was, the one who is, and the one who will be. So I want to thank Him for making me who I am, emotional and all, okay? I want to thank my wife, who you guys have no idea what she's gone through, except for those of you who have been through the fight. But to sit me watch look at the computer, she's come through the house, make multiple trips through, and I never move. I'm right there at the computer. You know, doing research, reading things, looking up case law, going through the statutory histories and all that kind of stuff. And for probably the last, I don't know, before the trial, probably 10 years, I was at that computer day and night. I lived in front of that computer doing, communications with other researchers. I think I don't have him up here. He just came to mind, the late Dan Meter, a wonderful man. Lindsay Springer, Oscar Steele, my attorney, Dr. Ed Rivera, Milton Baxley, a friend of mine who, those of you who may know him, recently wound up in prison on a contempt of court charge based upon something that he didn't do. Larry Beecraft for sharing, just sharing information, like by the avalanche. Joe Bannister, a hero of mine, was someone who really convinced me by what I read about him to finally make a stand. John Turner, a wonderful fella, and so many others that have shared research over the years that I couldn't even begin to even name them all. But I want to give you a little advice before we get going. Make sure you look before you jump. Find out how deep the water is and how large the sharks are. Count the cost before you go, because if you don't think you can bear the burden of the cost, then don't do it. Okay? You got to personally know everything that you're doing and the possible results of what you do before you go. Okay? You can't start off on a journey without having a map of where you're going and know what the end result's going to be. The enemy uses fear as a controlling device. As a matter of fact, I just recently saw the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee telling people that very thing on a video on YouTube. I couldn't believe it. It's a lot of admission that the IRS is used to instill fear and that they use it to control the people. I was just blown away by that. Yah doesn't give us a spirit of fear, but He gives us that of a sound mind. All right? So with that, know that when that spirit of fear comes against you, that's not your Creator talking to you. That's somebody else who's wanting to distract you. In the book of Hosea, the Scripture says that my people perish for lack of knowledge. Okay? Learn, read, study. Get away from the six-pack and the television set and go out and start forming cognitive ideas of your own. And I'm not saying that to beat up on anybody in particular. I'm just saying as a warning, as a people, we got to get away from that, because it is our duty to keep government in line, not the government's job to keep us in line. So take your rightful place in the structure and hierarchy of our government. You are the head and not the tail, despite what they want us to believe. So first, don't be afraid, or look first. Don't be afraid. Learn all you can. And when you've got that confidence that comes from first-hand knowledge, go ahead and make the decision. It's an educated determination of your course of action, and have the faith to know that you are wherever your journey or wherever your journey takes you, you're there where your Creator wants you in that particular time. And if you believe that with your heart of hearts, then fear has no place to hide. Okay, you can't get into you can't sink its teeth into you. You can't, claw at your back. And understand, this is a war of information and misinformation. I was told by a very reliable source that somewhere in Washington, D.C., the IRS has a hallway. Now, I don't know this to be a fact. I've not seen it. This is, you're getting hearsay right at this point in time. On this wall over here is the names of the prosecutors who prosecute tax cases. On this wall right across from them is paid government agents who intentionally and willfully and maliciously and with malice aforethought sell you information that they know is wrong, just to see if you'll bite, so then they feed you to the guy across the hall. So be very careful about what you're stepping out into. Be very careful and research thoroughly everything you go to do and say, especially in a public forum or anywhere where that information might eventually come back to haunt you. Okay, if you write to the government, make sure that you have factual information that you're sending to them that you can support with absolute public record documentation. Don't make a claim you can't support. Okay. So here's what we're going to cover. We're going to cover the Paperwork Reduction Act of 1995, is whether or not it's a valid defense in both civil and criminal cases according to the laws and the courts. Whether the court, or what the courts have said about the 1980 PRA and its previous issues, and what the courts have ruled in recent decisions relevant to the 95 PRA, because they're two separate acts, even though some people want you to think that one was only an amendment to the other. This is my disclaimer for those of you who may be government agents, and believe me, they're here. I wish you had the spine to stand up and let us see you, because I would like to engage you in public forum. I've already went to engage you once, and you decided you didn't want to. So, but that's another story. But I'm not an attorney, nor am I offering any form of legal counsel and/or any advice, because I'm not licensed to do so. I'm not a paid speaker. I'm here underneath my own free will, okay, and free of charge. And nor do I have any fiduciary interest in the contents of what I'm about to tell you. I'm not selling you anything. I have nothing to offer other than just these words. Because anything I'm selling you is called commercial speech. It's not protected under the First Amendment. I'm hereby exercising that right, both inalienable, unalienable, and secured by the Constitution, that the government is not supposed to trample upon or infringe upon that right. To free speech, association, freedom of thought, and said right to enter into the exchange of same, whether it be public or private. I'm not suggesting that anyone commit or omit any act or omission or to take any actions solely based upon today's lectures, but instead to act only upon their own understanding of law and as it is written, not as it's necessarily interpreted. Because after all, according to the Constitution, all men are created equal. And that means the judge, the prosecuting attorney, and you have equal standing and footing. And their opinion is no more valid than yours. I don't care what they think. And so if they're going to abide by that oath that they took to support and defend that document called the Constitution, then they have to know that they are of equal footing and their opinion is no more valid than yours. So that's why I say you have to go by the black letter of the law and what you interpret that to mean, because that is your understanding. And so they have to judge you based upon that. Anyone who acts or fails to act based upon that, today's dissemination of information does so at their own peril. Understand the risk. If anyone has any questions concerning this information, you should seek competent legal counsel before making any decisions on the course of action or lack thereof. Okay? Enough said about that. Citations of authority for free speech and association, for those of you who are government agents and, again, don't believe me. The general proposition that freedom of expression upon public questions is secured by the First Amendment has long been settled by our decisions. The constitutional safeguards, as we have said, was fashioned to assure unfettered interchange of ideas for the bringing about of political and social changes desired by the people, Roth versus United States. Okay, be sure to write this down. You might need it someday. After all, they're wanting to squelch your freedom of association and step upon your right to free speech. After all, we have free speech zones nowadays in political assemblies where you can only put posters and plaques and say things in certain areas where you're out of the hearing range of anyone who has any consequence. The maintenance of the opportunity of free political discussion to the end that government may be responsive to the will of the people and to the changes may be obtained by lawful means, an opportunity essential to the security of the Republic is a fundamental principle of our constitutional system. Strongberg versus California, 283 U.S. 390 or 359. More support for the same. Okay, I'm going to get a little closer because this is a little finer print. So it is a prized American privilege to speak one's mind, although not always with perfectly good taste, on all public institutions. Okay, skipping over the citation, and this opportunity is to be afforded for vigorous advocacy, no less than abstract discussion. What a concept. The absolute ability to be able to exchange ideas and understanding so that all of us can come to a consensus as to what things are and what's best for us so that we can move forward as a society and as a people and determine and make our representatives then follow our will. What an idea. Mr. Justice Brandeis, in his concurring opinion in Whitney versus California, gave the following principle its classic formulation. Come on. Here we go. Those who won our independence believed that public discussion is a political duty. Wow. It's our duty to do that. Come on, give it up for the founders, guys. You do better than that. And that this should be a fundamental principle of the American government. Wow, they've strayed from that. They recognize that the risk to which all human institutions are subject, but they knew that order cannot be secured merely through fear of punishment for its infraction. That it is hazardous, okay, wow, that it's hazardous to hazardous to discourage thought, hope, and imagination, that fear breeds repression, that repression breeds hate, and that hate menaces stable government. So they're causing the very thing that they're fearful of by trying to repress free thought and the exchange of free speech. They're creating their own destiny. Remember, we create our own reality. If they're afraid of you, the more they become afraid of you, the more reason they give themselves to be afraid of you. Yeah? Going on, because I know I only got so much time and I got tons of stuff to cover. So your support and participation is desperately needed in order to feed the public discussion required to make change in this country. And without your involvement, we have little hope of changing anything. We must understand how we got here and where we want to go in order to be able to design a plan of action that will, that with everyone's participation, can have any hope of success. Go out and make the world what we want it to be, guys. Okay, now how did I find this out? As I said, my grandfather and my father twisted my little child head all up and just made me, I got a fascination with words at an early age. What did they mean? Where did it come from? How did it get to have its colloquial meaning? There's a lot of words that I'm not going to say because they're not, shall we say, palatable in a public forum, but we have certain meanings to these words. You know? Some of them are considered vulgar, some of them are considered rude, you know? But they're part of the English language. Well, how did we get there where we started using this stuff? So I began doing research into words. And I found that in I think it was 1868, Congress gave themselves, I think it was the Dictionary Act, is what it was called, where they had the right to change the meaning of words. And when they're putting words in statutory constructive sense, they can make it mean whatever they want so long as they put the definition somewhere in the body of the statute. So things that you think the word means when you're reading it, and one of the things I always found fascinating was they have a whole, how many of you been to law libraries, by the way? Okay. Wow, great job, guys. How many of you have done word searches and words and phrases? Excellent. Then the one that fascinated me was the word shall. Shall is compulsory. You shall do X, Y, or Z. But when you look in words and phrases, the word shall means may. It says when used in construction of statutes, the word shall means may. Wow. You know, so it doesn't always mean what we think it means. So I'm going to go over how my case evolved from the Mitsubishi Motors case to the injunction to the criminal action, what happened since the dismissal, and the latest decisions of the court. And this is how it began. First, I learned ton of truth from a friend of mine as to the application of law concerning taxation and withholding. And subsequently, I had my employer, Mitsubishi Motors Manufacturing of America, which had about 3,800 employees, stop withholding. And that was a battle. I mean, they said, "We ain't gonna do that." I went, "Yeah, you will. Watch me." And so, filed the paperwork with them, and sure enough, they run it past the legal counsel, and I went back in there because they told me absolutely they weren't gonna do it. I walked into the office a week later, and before I got 50 feet from them, their head dropped. I went, "Oh, got a nerve." So I walk up there and I said, "Well, what did legal counsel say?" And they go, "They told us to do as you said." So they stopped withholding. They refused to stop Social Security, though. And I didn't find out until later that, believe it or not, there's a form that you can file with the Social Security Administration to have your withholding stopped on your Social Security even, because you can make it where that employment will not be a covered employment. And that way, both you and the employer doesn't have to pay any Social Security tax on that, if that's what you want. So you have to check with the Social Security Administration where to get the withdrawal form. But I didn't know that at the time. As I say, knowledge is an ongoing thing. In January 2000, 2 CID agents came to my house because I had stopped filing these confession forms, as Paymon calls them, in 98. So 98, 99, 2000, I hadn't filed a return. So somewhere around January of 2000, 2 CID agents come to my house. And at the time, I used to teach martial arts, a style called Otokwon Taekwondo. And I had a chain of schools and all that kind of stuff. And the only people who called me Mr. Lawrence were generally either government officers or my students. You know, no one else calls you that. And so these 2 ladies said Mr. Lawrence, and I didn't recognize the name, so I turned around and they go, "Well, I'm Agent so-and-so, this is Agent so-and-so, we're with the United States Department of the Treasury, Internal Revenue Service, Criminal Investigations Division. We're here to inform you that you are the target of a willful failure to file allegation." And I smiled and I said, "You can't be serious." And she goes, "You apparently don't understand the severity of the nature of this allegation." And I said, "You don't know how stupid you sound." And they look at each other like, "What planet is he from?" Yeah. And I said, "Who here has personal first-hand knowledge of the facts that I've refused to file, knowing I have a legal duty to do so?" And she goes, "Well, our records indicate you haven't filed." And I said, "Your records are right." I said, "I haven't." And man, her partner pulls out her notepad, because I just admitted to a crime. Yeah. And so I said, "The question is not whether or not I've refused, but whether I have a duty, and you have not answered my questions." And she goes, "Well, what questions do you mean?" I said, "I've written to your district director already because I knew I couldn't get nothing from you guys." And so I said, I wrote him because I knew where his office was at, and I figured he's the head hot shot over the area, and he'd have the knowledge. I said, he didn't answer. So I wrote him again, and he didn't answer again. And she goes, "You wrote the district director?" I said, "Yeah, check the RAC 001 correspondence record, honey. You might find out there's a lot more in there than just that." And she looked at me, and she looked at her partner, and she goes, "How do you know about that?" I said, "I've done a lot of reading." And I said, "There's a lot more in there that you don't know. After all, you're investigating me, right?" I said, "There's always more to the story than meets the eye." So anyway, we have a little more discussion, and she said, "Well, I want to talk to you about the income tax." I said, "I'm not going to talk to you anymore until after I talk to counsel." And her partner looked at her, and she looked at each other again, and she goes, "You have counsel?" I take a breath. I'm thinking, "Oh, Lord, where do they get these people?" And this is no diss on anybody who's formerly with the IRS, okay, because there were some good people there. Most of the good ones left. But anyway, yeah, all of the good ones left. All 4 of them. But anyway, I said, "Lady, I got 5 attorneys, 3 CPAs, and 2 enrolled agents who agree with me. How much more counsel do I need?" And the other one hits her and says, "Give him your card." So she gives me her card, and they went to walk away. I said, "Oh, well, by the way, since we're asking each other questions," I said, "Are you armed?" And she stops, and they look at each other and go, "Well, we're Criminal Investigation Division's officers." And I said, "I don't care. Are you armed?" And she said, "Well, yeah." I said, "Well, you know, there's a possibility if it's later found out that you're here without a delegation of authority from the Secretary of the Treasury to come talk to me, and the fact that you came with a threatening communication and that you were armed escalates your trespass upon my property from a misdemeanor to a felony. Have a good day. They ran to their car. Okay? I'm not joking. They beat feet, boy, they were ready to get out of there. So a little while later, I happened to have a little thing going on, and John Turner came down there, and an investigative reporter by the name of Pat Shannon. And Pat and John and I decided we were going to go find out what the IRS's record said about me. So we went over there to the local IRS office, and I go in and I asked this lady, I said, hey, do you have XYZ records? You know, individual master file, business master file, non-master file, you know, tax mod, N mod A, and so on like that. And with each thing I asked her, the color went, just ran right out of her. And she leans over the counter and she goes, who are you? I wanted to say I'm the devil, but I didn't do that. You know. Yeah. But anyway, I looked at her, I said, I'm just a citizen who's done some homework, and I know these are records that you have. She goes, no. I've been here with the agency 25 years. How did you know about these records, and how did you know to call them by name? I said, it's a matter of public record. She goes, well, no one asked for these records. I said, someone just did. And so anyway, we went through a little dialogue. She gave me an IMF OLT that doesn't tell you anything. And I said, this isn't what I wanted. She goes, that's all you're going to get. And I looked at her and I said, that's okay. Just because you want to be non-compliant doesn't mean the disclosure officer in Chicago won't give me what I want through FOIA. So have a nice day. I'll get it anyway. And she's like, how'd you know about that? I said, well, duh, I told you already. I did homework. I know. So, you know, when you research the law, it empowers you. You don't have to be afraid to walk into the devil's den and say, this is what I want, and you're going to give it to me. And if you won't give it to me, I'll get it another way. So that's one thing. So they went away 5 years later. It took them 5 whole years of investigation before we get to where we're going to go out here in a couple of minutes. So anyway, the IRS finally sends my employer a lock-in letter. It says withhold from him at single and zero. I tell my employer, that's not nice. You know, you're going to get in trouble. And so I hunt up an attorney who's at least willing to listen to the issues. I train this guy in what the law says. I teach him all about the withholding statutes and all this, and he's all gung-ho, let's go do it. So we file a conversion action in state court. And that way we don't have to raise a federal question. We know that we can get the facts in the law before the court, and we're ready to go. Next thing I know, we're about, a month before we're supposed to go to trial. And my attorney gets an invitation to go to the Super Bowl, but from another attorney. And I told him, we got plenty of time, go ahead. You know, the opposition just filed a rebuttal motion, so now we've got a little while before we got to file a response. I said, so go ahead and go, man, you have a good time. He comes back, and he's got a good ongoing practice in Illinois. He's taking on some major employers in the state and just kicking the stuffings out of them. So I'm confident we're going to have a really good shot there in state court on my issues. He comes back from the Super Bowl, and I don't hear anything from him. And I'm getting concerned because the clock's ticking. I call him, leave messages. Next thing I know, we got like 2 days left before we got to have a filing in. And he calls me and says, what about this? I said, don't raise a federal question. Do not raise a federal issue in the state court because they'll remove it, and they're going to be fighting like cats and dogs to try to get remanded back. The day that the thing was due to be filed, he goes down, he files it, raises a federal question, files his withdrawal from the case, shuts down his practice in Illinois, drops about 50 clients, and flees the state to Minnesota, where he hides in his mother's basement for 2 years. What do you think happened? Someone scared him in that trip to the Super Bowl. So, anyway, that's what happened with the conversion case. Immediately after the federal dismissal under a 12b-6 for failing to state a claim upon which relief can be granted because there is no federal cause of conversion, I get a 6700 action in the mail. I'm one of the first ones to get one, and you've seen them going around the world now. So I was a pretty important target. They wanted to shut me up right away. So anyway, in the course of things, I challenged the federal jurisdiction of the court. You know, the judge and I have a dissertation. He throws something at me that I could not answer, which if you want to talk to me in private, I'll tell you all about that, but I don't have enough time to go through that now. I ended up with 6 months in prison for contempt of court because I did something that couldn't possibly have happened. The judge issued an order. I also issued a letter to the clerk of the court, and they passed in the mail. He held me in contempt for it. So I did 6 months there. While I was in, people just like you took care of my wife, financially speaking, and she didn't want for anything. I am thankful to the American people for that, and especially to a gentleman whose name I won't mention, but he sent my wife a considerable amount of money every month because he was a fairly blessed individual, and we did not lose everything based upon that, and that was what the enemy counted on. I lost my job due to attendance because I couldn't go to work because I was in prison. After returning home, I found the summary judgment waiting for me in the mail. I tried to fight that off. I was doing it pro se, trying to survive, trying to fight them, and of course, needless to say, they got the injunction that they wanted. So anyway, on my birthday, March 18th, 2006, my mom calls me. She says, "Have you read the paper today?" "No, why?" "You've been indicted." I said, "You can't be serious." She said, "Yep, it's in the newspaper." So I went and pulled it out. Yep, there it was. And then later that day, I get it in the mail, "You've been indicted, come, do this, that, and the other thing." This is just to show you a little bit of a dichotomy over the same issue. East Peoria faces trial on income tax evasion. Gosh, could it have been the season? It was March of 2006. Federal confession day a month later. Oh, wow. So anyway, they say, tax defendant turns table on revenuers. And they want us to believe that they dismissed on accounting error, like I said earlier. Well, let's see. Even the federal I got 10 minutes? I thought I had until 10:35 or 12:35. Hey, man, you're killing me. They say they want more time, brother. Huh? Okay, let's skip through here a whole bunch of stuff. I'm just going to skip right through the... Okay, guys, here we go. Now you can get the Reader's Digest version. Thank you. Paymon, he did this to me last time too, guys. Okay. I'm going to spank him now. 1980 PRA required 5 things in all information collections requests, so I'm going to have to really fly now. It needs an approved date, an expiration date. It needs a mandatory or voluntary statement. It needs, come on computer, a current OMB control number. And it needed the citation of authority compelling performance. Okay? Did the 1040 comply with the 1980 Act? Do we see an approved date, expiration date? How about a mandatory voluntary statement? Does it display an OMB control number? Yes. Okay? Did it cite the authority? Here's what the answers are. 1 through 5. No, it does not display an approved date. No, there is no posted expiration date. No, there is no mandatory or voluntary statement as required by 3506. Yes, it did display an OMB control number. The question is was it valid? And no, there's no statutory citation on its face. Guess what? The 83 I's, which the IRS was supposed to submit to the Office of Management and Budget, OMB has all the OMB 83 I's except for the very first one. They can't find that one. I can't figure out why. Do other agencies' forms comply? Okay, let's take a look. These here show that they have a mandatory voluntary statement. They have the approved, is this in here? Yeah, the date the form was approved, its number, it has an expiration date, and it tells you whether or not it's mandatory or voluntary and how the information will be used. Same here, same here, same here, same here. That one doesn't have it. Lord have mercy, how come? Maybe because they can't comply. So does the 1040 comply with the Act as far as we can tell? By appearances, no. It can't now, can't in the future, because if it does now, that's an admission that they weren't in the past. Well, man, January 1st, 2006, they did something incredible, absolutely incredible, and it took kahunas this big. They had a special need that they filed in the Federal Register, and they changed the OMB control numbers for the W-2, W-4, 1099, all 1040 variants, and the 1041 and 1120, all to the same control number. Now, by law, they're supposed to have separate and unique identifying and clearance numbers. So, what's with that? Okay, and we're going to skip through a whole bunch of other stuff here. I've got too much stuff, okay? 10 minutes is not enough time. Not enough time. All right, citations for the Paperwork Reduction Act, Disclosure Act, which is in the instruction booklet, which is a violation of the PRA right from the get-go. quotes the 1980 PRA rather than the language of the 95 Act. It cites 6001, 6011, and 6012A as their regulations as their legal right to ask. How many of you remember the Bob Schultz controversy where he petitioned Congress for redress of grievance, and they said, you have a right to petition, but you have no right to an answer? Well, guess what? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. You got a right to ask, but you don't have a right to get an answer. Sorry. All right? Now, this is not, by the way, a liability statute. That is, it says, as a matter of fact, right here, it says every person liable. Well, that statute doesn't do that. It doesn't make you liable. Where's the liability statute? For any tax imposed by this title. And then it goes on to say you'll be required to keep such records, render such statements, or make such returns and comply with such rules and regulations as the Secretary may from time to time prescribe. Well, it further says this. Whenever in the judgment of the Secretary is necessary, he may require any person by notice served upon such person. Guys, I didn't get the memo, did you? Where's your service? I would ask him for the mail filing log showing when you were given the service of your notice of what records you're supposed to keep and what tax you're liable for. Yeah, I know. Okay. Skipping forward here in time, Lord. This is what the different courts have said about the statutory origin theory. We have a bifurcation in the law and the courts. Some are subscribing to the statutory origin theory. They're saying that your requirement to file a return arises by statute. Some of them are saying not. Some of them are saying yes, but it arises by regulation. Some are saying no to all of it. Okay? So that's a major telling point. They can't decide where the requirement to file a return, or as they say, make a return in the statutes, comes from. They can't determine where the liability arises. If they can't decide, how on God's green earth can we decide? And I use the G-O-D word, sorry, Father. I try not to do that. And those of you who want to know about that, I'll tell you about that in private too. There's problems with the exempt amount in 6012. First problem is it does not arise under a statutory authority, but it arises by agency action, by a formula. We, the people, are not under the authority of agency action, as that's internal to the agency only. Second, how is the exempt amount measured? They measure it in dollars. How many of you have heard the Karn case here recently? And I think it's a beautiful thing that he decided that he was going to pay his employees in dollars rather than Federal Reserve notes, and they choked on it. Okay? For those of you who want to see this here, this is from one of Lindsay's cases. It's an incredible statement about the exempt amount and how it relates to the Paperwork Reduction Act and other issues. So because of time constraints, I've got to go on with this here. Question, can a federal regulation create a specific liability when no specific liability is created by the corresponding statute? The answer is obviously no. The U.S. Constitution vests all legislative powers in the Congress of the United States. See Article 1, Section 8. The executive branch of the federal government has no legislative power whatsoever. This means that agencies of the executive branch and also the federal courts and the judicial branch are prohibited from making law, despite what they think. If an act of Congress fails to create a specific liability for any tax imposed by that act, there is no liability for that tax. Executive agencies have no authority to cure any such omission by using regulations to create a liability. Administrative agencies may not create a criminal offense or any liability not sanctioned by the lawmaking authority, especially the liability for a tax. We'll skip down. That's Commissioner of Internal Revenue versus Acker, 361 U.S. 87. That was in 1959, and that citation was removed in 1994 from American jurisprudence. You want to hide it. Okay, so how was it improved? After the United States, Dole versus United Steelworkers said that all information collections requests are, all tax returns are information collections requests according to the Act, which is the PRA. Congress further saw that there were OMB control numbers that were out of date and no longer valid via the 80 Act. Okay, and I'm going to try to get to that real quick as to show you why. Okay, where's the penalty? The term penalty includes the imposition by an agency or court of a fine or other punishment, a judgment of monetary damages or equitable relief, or the revocation, suspension, reduction, or denial of a license, privilege, right, grant, or benefit. Did they deny Joe Bannister a right or a benefit? Sure they did. They punished him by the denial of or reduction of a license to practice before them, even though he didn't ask for one to begin with. Same with other ones. The director is to oversee of the office that's created within the agency. They have to have a particular officer that they call a director to oversee the information collections management and resources, which is all the tax forms. He's supposed to make sure all this stuff is right. Man, I'm going to have to go through this here. 3506, 4B, B5, or V. The fact of an agency may not conduct or sponsor, and a person is not required to respond to the collection of information unless it displays a valid control number. 3507 goes on further. It says the director must certify that these forms submit a certification required under Section 3506C3. The proposed collection of information, copies of pertinent statutory authority, regulations, and other related materials the director may specify, and then publish it in the Federal Register. Not been done so far as what we can tell for the 1040. The director may not approve a collection of information for a period to exceed 3 years. Gosh, the number for the 1040 has been done for 26 years. So how, or 27 now. So how is it that that number is continued valid? Well, they say, well, we believe that we can ask for, we can resubmit every 3 years for a new approval. Not according to the statutes. They have to come up with a new number. Are we protected by the law? If you have failed to make, now, okay, I want to make a clarification here. When you're pinned down in a court, they want to say, we believe you're required to file. You know what? That term file is found nowhere in the statutes, anywhere. And there is a difference between make and file. And I hope that I want to drive this point home to you real quick because I am rapidly running out of time. To make a return means that you are answering questions on an information collections request. Now, they may have a point, and they're going to twist ties the statutory intent of Congress to say it meant file a return. No, they said make a return. So to make means to answer questions, to place monies or Federal Reserve notes or a check or whatever with that and return it to the government. To file a return is to file 13 it, as far as I'm concerned. Put it in a round file, okay? So I don't file, yeah, I guess I do file returns, okay? Because I haven't been able to find either the statutory command that compels my performance or the statute that makes me liable, or the statute says I, under duress, threat, and coercion, can be forced to answer a question. So how do we, if someone says that you are so required, you're so made liable, subject to, yada, yada, do you know what form you're required to file since the statute doesn't identify it? No. So since the statute doesn't identify it, can the regulation? No, because the regulation can only enforce what the statute says. It cannot expand by implication. So if the form you are told is required to be filed or made, who told you, by what authority? And then once you've determined what form is, the form is that you're required to do so with, is it compliant with the PRA? Okay, here we go. Who's protected? Who can raise it? Where can you raise it? And under what circumstances is not available to you? Okay, we're going to cut down here real quick. It says, notwithstanding any of the provision of law, period, point blank, end of story, that entire law library, it does not matter one iota what anything in that entire library says if that form's not compliant. It says, notwithstanding any of the provision of the law, this means everything combined. No person shall be subject to any penalty for failing to comply with a bootleg form. Congress must have known that there were invalid numbers out there by the inclusion of the term valid in the rewrite of the 95 Act. The protection of this section can be raised at any time to any office or to any agent or to any sign of the agency or department. It appears that they do know about it, but they wish to deny it. Come on. Why does the agency continue to quote a law that's been rewritten? Because they want to say the 95 Act was an amendment. We know that's not true. And what evidence do we have to show that they know this? 2005 PRA notice and Privacy Act notice cites the 1980 Act. Okay? The instruction booklet doesn't quote the 95. Okay? They tell you 6001, 6011, 6012 are the statutes which require you to file, yet all three are not liability statutes. Your responses according to the agency are required under these statutes, yet it is only, you only find out which form they're claiming is this way under the regulation. I mean, I hate this. I've got to go just give you this so fast. There's so much we need to cover. Who writes the IRM? The Office of Chief Counsel. Does the IRM cite the 1980 Act? No. It says in Section 21, 3.3.1, says that they can only issue two forms of communications. The information collections request must have a unique clearance number. A document perfections request must show the OMB control number of the parent form that they're trying to perfect. Okay, what's an information collections request? To start with, 1040, W-2, 1099, etc., all tax forms that fall underneath the ICR grouping class, if you will, according to the Supreme Court case Dole versus United Steelworkers. According to the IRM, ICRs can be a form, letter, notice, and other document used to request information from at least 10 taxpayers, such as major tax forms, instructions, public use forms, CSC, SCSP, drafts, letters, and dictated letters, and CP notices. For those of you who are not required to file a return, I don't like using the non-filer thing because that means you were required to file, but you just didn't do it. For those of you not required, and you get a CP notice at 515, where's your return? Do you know if that's an ICR or a DPR? No, because a DPR, what are they? They're forms used to perfect the parent form. They don't have an OMB clearance number, but they have to carry the one of the parent form. DPRs do not have an expiration date, and they include CSC and SCSP letters, drafts, dictated letters, CP notices, quick notes, and C notes. Now, wait a minute. We got CP notices that can be either a DPR or an ICR. How do we know which is which? You don't, because the agency, I've only seen one example of where they complied with putting an OMB control number on one. And I've seen thousands of them. Okay? Do they comply? No, not according to the IRM. They don't comply according to statute. They don't comply according to regulation. And they've been thumbing their nose at Congress since 1980. So anyway, I'm going to have to cut through some of this here too. Okay? The IRM does say that they must show the expiration date and the OMB control number in the upper right-hand corner of all documents that they send. I'm out of time. Okay. Y'all, ain't my fault. I didn't do it. Okay, but I want to cut through some things here. What have the courts ruled? So you guys are just going to hang on. I ain't going to give this up yet. Check this out. The courts have said the 1995 PRA is not a frivolous defense. They have said that the government offered no evidence that the 1040 was valid in a recent case called Chisholm. That the PRA does not offer you a private right of action, but it acts as a defense. The 8th and 9th Circuit both said so. They said that the PRA protects people from failure to file, but not for filing and lying. Okay, that was also in Chisholm. If you want to read this, see me afterwards. I'll let you read that. Okay, to recap, the PRA is a defense against failure to file according to the courts. It's not frivolous under the 95 Act, like it was, they claimed, after the 83 underneath the 80 Act. The PRA is not a defense against lying on your return. If you did, the PRA may be raised any time to any agent officer at any level, including during judicial review. That's what happened in my case. In my case, I stipulated to everything in the record. Yes, the money in that bank account was mine. Yes, the W-2s indicate the amount of Federal Reserve notes that I was paid. Yes, I sold these 2 houses for the amount of monies that you claim. Yes, all to everything, all the way down the thing, but the very last question was whether I was required to file under the PRA was no. The day before trial, the Department of Justice, underneath their own submission, placed a motion to withdraw with prejudice, which means they can't ever come back. Now you tell me they dismissed under an accounting error. The only issue in controversy was whether the PRA was a defense. And I told them I was ready for them, let's dance. And they chose not to. So are you required to know the law? Yes. In Cheek versus U.S., the court affirmed that the general rule that ignorance of the law or a mistake of law is no defense in a criminal prosecution is... Uh-oh, somebody's shutting me off back there. Did you guys do that? Well, somebody's going to hang somebody. Okay, let me see if I can scroll this up here and click that out. I don't know where that came from. Okay, where's the IRS agent that's trying to get rid of this presentation? Okay. But anyway, knowledge of the law is deeply rooted in American jurisprudence. This notion was based on the law being definite and knowable. How many times have we heard from presidents, from secretaries of the Treasury, and from commissioners that we got 9,000 pages of gobbledygook that can't be understood by the average person? You have people with CPAs who can't come to a concise determination. You have courts who can't agree. Yet, we're supposed to know the law. The common law presumed that every person knew the law, but the common law rule was that it was applied by the court in numerous cases construing criminal statutes was that the law was knowable, which is why Cheek and Bryan and Ratcliffe is so important, because they said you had to know that you had a duty and you had to know the statute you violated. And even the IRS doesn't know. So if they can't know, how can we? Okay? So let me go on to here. See, there's a couple. No, don't you dare do that. Escape? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, where are we at here? Come on. Ah! Okay, what's going on here? Yes, sir. Okay. The boss says I got to shut up. Take it up with the boss. Guys, thanks for coming. I'll be happy to share this with anybody who wants to see it later. So, okay. Okay. Well, yeah. www.penaltyprotester.org. Go there. All my case documents are there. All the citations of law are there. Have at it. It's free for public dissemination. And I hope that maybe something that we have offered today will change your paradigm on how you understand what they're doing. www.penaltyprotester.org.
Yeah, the website is penaltyprotester.org, folks. Again, as usual, none of our speakers will have enough time to give you all that they want to give you, okay, including myself. That's why, we bring them all to you, and you choose which one you want to get more information by. Go to the website and more information there, okay, penaltyprotester.org. Folks, we're going to pass the hat around for Jeff Dickstein. Dave Von Kleist is going to do that. And folks, so we are ahead of schedule only maybe by 5 minutes because Anthony finished early. But I want to let you guys know of two things. That if you like these speeches, if you want to have a chance to review this stuff that you heard that went too fast, you want to get the CDs or DVDs of the speakers, you can go home and then listen to it again and really absorb it a second time around. The forms are outside. You can order that you want as speakers, each of them or all of them. Do that before end of the day. We'll have the CDs and DVDs available. The Constitution class of Friday that many of you were there, that's available also. That's already